Here's your fact for the day, episode 1. The year 46 BC is known as the year of confusion, because said year was 445 days long. Because Julius Caesar, the emperor of Rome at the time, added 3 extra months to the calendar in order to make his Julian calendar line up with the seasonal year calendar. Hopefully I told you something you haven't been told before. Here's your fact for today, episode 2. It takes around 3,000 cows to supply enough leather for a full season's worth of NFL footballs. Well, I guess you know that fact now. Here's your fact for the day, episode 3. German chocolate cake was named after its inventor, English-American baker Samuel German, and not after the country of Germany. Here's your fact for today, episode 4. Before coming to the United States as a toy in the 1920s, the yo-yo was originally used in the Philippines as a weapon in the 16th century. Here's your fact for today, episode 5. The first number to be spelled using the letter A is 1000. Here's your fact for the day, episode 6. Lake Superior has a larger landmass than Scotland. Here's your fact for the day, episode 7. Although a Major League Baseball game typically lasts around 3 hours, on average there are only around 10 minutes of actual playing time. Don't swap away, here's your fact for the day, episode 8. In 1987, American Airlines saved $40,000 annually by removing one olive from their first-class salads. Don't swipe away, here's your fact for the day, episode 9. Over 2,000 years ago, Eratosthenes estimated the Earth's circumference using math, without ever leaving Egypt. He was accurate within 2%. Here's your fact for the day, episode 10. The blue bird in the Twitter logo is named Larry after basketball player Larry Bird. Here's your fact for the day, episode 11. Potatoes were the first vegetable to be grown in space. Here's your fact for the day, episode 12. The comparative size between an atom and a grain of sand is about the same ratio as that between a grain of sand and the planet Earth. Here's your fact for the day, episode 13. There are around 200 corpses on Mount Everest, many of which are used as markers for climbers. Here's your fact for the day, episode 14. The Hollywood sign on the hills in Los Angeles originally read Hollywood Land. Here's your fact for the day, episode 15. Venus is the only planet in our solar system that rotates clockwise. Here's your fact for the day, episode 16. A hippopotamus sweat is red but does not contain blood. The red pigment provides a natural sunblock and also prevents bacterial growth on your skin. Here's your fact for the day, episode 17. Alaska has a longer coastline than the other 48 states put together. Here's your fact for the day, episode 18. The first ever book written with a typewriter was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Here's your fact for the day, episode 19. The average lifespan of a pet cat has more than doubled from the 1980s to 2021, increasing from 7 years to 15 years. Here's your fact for the day, episode 20. Facebook's color scheme is blue because owner Mark Zuckerberg suffers from red-green color blindness. Here's your fact for the day, episode 21. A giraffe's heart is about 2 feet long. Here's your fact for the day, episode 22. The Great Fire of London in 1666 destroyed more than 13,500 homes and displaced more than 80,000 people, but amazingly only caused 6 deaths. Here's your fact for the day, episode 23. 1 in 10 people born in Europe are thought to be conceived in an IKEA bed. Here's your fact for the day, episode 24. 4 is the only number that is spelled with the same number of letters as itself. Here's your fact for the day, episode 25. Outback Steakhouse was founded by 4 Americans, none of whom had ever been to Australia. Here's your fact for the day, episode 26. J.K. Rowling's original Harry Potter pitch was rejected by 12 different publishers before Bloomsbury accepted it. Here's your fact for the day, episode 27. The mathematical symbol for division, this, is called an obelisk. Here's your fact for the day, episode 28. The grizzly bear is the state animal of California, even though one hasn't been spotted there since 1922. Here's your fact for the day, episode 29. Strength is the longest word with only one vowel. Here's your fact for the day, episode 30. Even though the Statue of Liberty is on Liberty Island, which belongs to New York, it is actually located closer to the landmass of New Jersey. Here's your fact for the day, episode 31. A single litter of kittens can have more than one father. Here's your fact for the day, episode 32. Since tomatoes are native to the Americas, there was no tomato sauce in Italy until the 16th century. Here's your fact for the day, episode 33. A pineapple takes anywhere from 1.5 to 3 years to grow. Here's your fact for the day, episode 34. A cockroach can live for 9 days without its head before it finally dies of starvation. Here's your fact for the day, episode 35. The most expensive book ever purchased was Leonardo da Vinci's Codex Leicester, which was sold to Bill Gates for $30.8 million. Here's your fact for the day, episode 36. Toilet paper is thought to have been first produced in the late 800s AD in China. Here's your fact for the day, episode 37. According to a 2020 study, at least 27% of Americans over the age of 18 have cut off contact with a family member. Here's your fact for the day, episode 38. You can hear a blue whale's heartbeat from over 2 miles away. Their hearts alone can weigh close to 400 lbs. Here's your fact for the day, episode 39. James Patterson was the first ever writer to exceed 1 million sales in ebooks. Here's your fact for the day, episode 40. The 7 consecutive Tour de France's from 1999 to 2005 have been declared without winners because not only Lance Armstrong, but also many of the riders who finished behind him have been associated with doping offenses. Here's your fact for the day, episode 41. The 3 most read books in the world today are believed to be the Bible, quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong, and Harry Potter. Here's your fact for today, episode 42. Abraham Lincoln was a local wrestling champion before his political career took off. He wrestled in close to 300 contestants and only lost 1. Here's your fact for today, episode 43. John Steinbeck's original manuscript for Of Mice and Men was eaten by his dog, Toby. Here's your fact for the day, episode 44. Kool-Aid was invented in Hastings, Nebraska in the year 1927. Here's your fact for the day, episode 45. Twister was the first movie released on DVD all the way back in 1996. Here's your fact for the day, episode 46. Durum, which grows in southern Asia, is known as the smelliest fruit in the world. It can smell like rotten eggs, sweaty socks, or garbage. Here's your fact for the day, episode 47. The official state question in New Mexico is red or green, which refers to which type of chili sauce you'll like on your food. Here's your fact for the day, episode 48. The squid's brain is ring-shaped, with its esophagus running through it. If it eats anything too large, it can suffer brain damage. Here's your fact for the day, episode 49. The word pothole is a redundant term. Pot comes from the Middle English word pit, meaning hole. Thus, a pothole is a hole. Here's your fact for the day, episode 50. A study done by Union College in 2019 determined that joining a fraternity lowered a student's GPA by 0.25 on average, but increased their future income by 36% compared to those who didn't join. Here's your fact for the day, episode 51. Benin, a country in Central Africa, has the highest birth rate of twins around the world. The world average is around 1.3 twins, but the rate in Benin is more than double that at 3%. Here's your fact for the day, episode 52. George Washington never knew that dinosaurs existed, as they were not studied scientifically until the 1800s. Here's your fact for the day, episode 53. The longest wedding veil on record stretched to 22,843 feet, which is more than 4 miles long. Here's your fact for the day, episode 54. The M185 highway that goes around Michigan's Mackinac Island is the only state highway in the United States that bans all motor vehicles. Here's your fact for the day, episode 55. A few contemporary names, such as Jessica, Olivia, and Merida, are credited as to having been created by William Shakespeare. Here's your fact for the day, episode 56. On the Apollo 10 spaceflight, there was an unidentified turd floating around the spacecraft, for which each of the astronauts denied responsibility. Here's your fact for the day, episode 57. Bats eat enough insects each year to save the United States more than $1 billion annually in crop damage and pesticides. Here's your fact for the day, episode 58. In ancient Egypt, all ships visiting Alexandria were obliged to surrender their books to the Royal Library to be copied. The original would be kept in the library and the copy given back to the owner. Here's your fact for the day, episode 59. Before becoming a famous painter, Bob Ross was a military drill sergeant. Here's your fact for the day, episode 60. Bubbles are the #1 cause of damage to ship propellers. Here's your fact for the day, episode 61. There are more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Here's your fact for the day, episode 62. There are more public libraries in the US than Starbucks or McDonald's. Here's your fact for the day, episode 63. Camels originated in North America. Here's your fact for the day, episode 64. Sharks have no bones. And by the way, I have a Fiverr gig, so go check it out. Here's your fact for the day, episode 65. Due to their fur, the polar bear is relatively invisible to infrared cameras. Here's your fact for the day, episode 66. Cosmic latte is the average color of the universe. Here's your fact for the day, episode 67. The Dangle fence in Australia is longer than the distance between New York City to London. Here's your fact for the day, episode 68. The smallest park in the world is a circle in a street 2 feet across, and it's in Portland, Oregon. Here's your fact for the day, episode 69. Wombat poop is square. Here's your fact for the day, episode 70. People living in the southern hemisphere see the moon upside down compared to people living in the northern hemisphere. Here's your fact for the day, episode 71. During World War II, the US created a bomb that used live bats. Here's your fact for the day, episode 72. Cows have friends, and they get stressed when they are separated. Here's your fact for the day, episode 73. Twinkies only have a 45-day shelf-life. Here's your fact for the day, episode 74. In a room with just 23 people, there's a 50-50 chance that at least 2 people have the same birthday. Here's your fact for the day, episode 75. A jail for polar bears exists. Here's your fact for the day, episode 76. The Canary Islands were named after dogs, not canaries. Here's your fact for the day, episode 77. Scotland has over 400 words for snow. Here's your fact for the day, episode 78. In space, you don't need welding materials to get 2 metals to fuse. They will do it on their own if you place them close enough together. Here's your fact for the day, episode 80. It's suspected that on Neptune and Uranus, it rains diamonds. Here's your fact for the day, episode 81. If a Lone Star tick bites you, you may become allergic to red meat. Here's your fact for the day, episode 82. If sound could travel through space, the noise that the sun would be the equivalent to a train horn from 1 meter away. Here's your fact for the day, episode 83. More than 80% of the Earth's ocean is unmapped, unobserved, and unexplored. Here's your fact for the day, episode 84. 15% of all public corporations in the United States use a drab 2-story office space in Delaware as their tax haven, including half of all Fortune 500 companies. Here's your fact for the day, episode 85. Firefighters sometimes use wetting agents to make water wetter. Here's your fact for the day, episode 86. A Japanese company gives its non-smoking employees 6 extra vacation days to compensate for smoking breaks. Here's your fact for the day, episode 87. On average, the closest planet to Earth is Mercury. Also on average, the closest planet to Pluto is also Mercury. Here's your fact for the day, episode 88. The first can opener wasn't invented until almost 50 years after the invention of the can. Here's your fact for the day, episode 89. Buffalo, 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 buffalo is a grammatically correct sentence. Here's your fact for the day, episode 90. Lemurs use millipedes as an insect repellent and to get high. Here's your fact for the day, episode 91. Most of the visible stars you see in the night sky are binary stars, which are 2 stars orbiting each other. Here's your fact for the day, episode 92. In 1961, 2 hydrogen bombs were accidentally dropped over North Carolina. A glitch prevented them from detonating. Here's your fact for the day, episode 93. Military grade is actually a marketing play. In the actual military grade is defined as meeting the bare minimum requirements of durability while also costing the least. Here's your fact for the day, episode 94. The couple in the painting American Gothic are actually father and daughter and not husband and wife. Here's your fact for the day, episode 95. It took Eno Rubik, the creator of the Rubik's Cube, about 1 month to solve the cube after he created it. Here's your fact for the day, episode 96. A dog named Duke was the mayor of Cormorant, Minnesota for 4 consecutive terms before retiring at 91 in dog years. Here's your fact for the day, episode 97. A teacher from the US state of Georgia who bought a $400 travel insurance policy was rewarded $10,000 because she read the fine print of the contract. Here's your fact for the day, episode 98. The founder of Match.com, Gary Crewman, lost his girlfriend to another man she met on Match.com. Here's your fact for the day, episode 99. The longest boxing match in history took place in 1893 between Andy Bowen and Jack Burke, and it lasted 110 rounds in over 7 hours. Here's your fact for the day, episode 100! Canada's forests make up nearly 9% of the world's total forest area.